Hey folks, this month's topic is non-specialist polytheist worship and work. And before we even really dig into the meat of things, we have to define what worship is. Now, generally speaking, worship is defined as adoration and or reverence for a god, goddess, or other being. This works. So, worship comes from Old English and it means to be worthy of or to be worthy. And so we can also include this in our understanding that our gods are worthy of worship and that the reverence and adoration that we give them, they are worthy of. And the object of worship, the objective of worship, if you will, is to further our relationship with the gods, ancestors, and Vatir, the spirits. So this goes for non-specialists and it goes for specialists. Basically, the contents of this video are the backbone for most any specialist in a polytheist religion that I can think of. Because what I do as a spiritual specialist, from an exoteric, that is the outward facing public face of heathenry, isn't altogether all that different from what supports my work as an esoteric practitioner. And esoteric is the opposite of exoteric. Esoteric is the inner work, the work of a mystic, whereas the exoteric is usually the work of lay people, even priests, which is an outwardly facing thing. So non-specialists comprise most of heathenry and most polytheist religions. Specialists happen to have, a lot of us anyway, happen to have big mouths and platforms. And so it can give off the impression as though spiritual specialists are the meat and potatoes of polytheists communities, and it's not the case. Lay people comprise most of the people. Without lay people, I would have nobody to serve except maybe other spiritual specialists, and it doesn't really make the ground of a community solid. Lay people, non-specialists, these are the people that form the very ground of a religious community. So the notion that you have to be some spiritual specialist, if that's being pushed in your circles, it's utter bullshit. There's no reason that everybody has to be a spiritual specialist. And that's not to say that you, as a non-specialist, can't have access to the techniques or some of the things that make a spiritual specialist a specialist. Easy case is divination. So divination is accessible to pretty much everybody, but the depth, the kinds of divination, that's a different story. And of course, I am not speaking for closed practices such as Ifa, Santeria, so on and so forth. I am merely speaking as a polytheist in the Western world to other Western, mostly American polytheists at this point. I don't know how it is in other countries. I've never lived in another one. So with that, your mileage may vary, but generally speaking, what non-specialist worship looks like are daily prayers, daily offerings. Now, I say daily, not everybody can do daily, nor should you be guilty feeling or be guilted into this notion that you have to do offerings every single day or prayers every single day. I do. And my family does make prayers every single day, but we certainly don't make offerings every single day. Some folks can do it once a week. Some folks can do it every day. Kudos to you who can do it every single day. Also, kudos to you who can only do it once out of the month. All of us have lives. I think the gods understand. So a non-specialist worship, again, forms the ground that everybody else lifts off from. And what that looks like is going to depend on your circumstances, your needs, and your abilities. But the basics of non-specialist polytheist worship is some kind of clean service, and it can be a simple white cloth on the ground if you're really strapped for space. If you're really, really strapped for space, or you need to be quiet about your religion, developing a small shrine in an Altoid tin is perfectly acceptable. You can put a prayer card or a small icon of your god into this Altoid tin, have a small white cloth or a handkerchief in there with, say, an LED candle if you can't have anything else. I started my journey as a pagan in 2004 with 5 salt crystals in a small glass vial. Whatever you have to hand to start with, it will be good enough, I swear to you. I do not swear often. Well, I don't make oaths very often. I swear like a sailor. Um, Point being, though, is that you can start from really small beginnings, and that is a-okay. And I actually recommend it because you start building shrine space, they can get really kind of crazy quick with the sprawling. So take your time. You're not in a rush. You don't have to have the most awesomest statues. And if all you can afford is to print off a picture of your god with a simple, even a sheet of clean white paper will work. Like, go bare bones if you need to. Start that simple. And for the space, all you have to do is just make sure the area is clean, and you ask the gods at a minimum to bless it, to cleanse the space, to cleanse the place, and make it a place that is ready for them. A really easy way to do this is to take a lighter or a match, assuming you can use fire. Otherwise, use an LED candle for this, and call on fire and ask it to cleanse the space. I've developed rote prayers that work for me and my family, but it can be as simple as, "Hail fire, thank you for being here. Please, eldest ancestor, cleanse this space." Pass the candle flame or the LED candle over the spot 3 times with the sun, and you're done. The space is prepped. And from there, you can begin praying. You can ask the fire spirit to cleanse more objects, such as the picture you have, the handkerchief, the Altoid tin, the whatever you have at hand. And that is probably the most simplest way to start in any kind of worship, whether it's gods, ancestors, or Vatir. So start small. Everything can start small and then grow if that's what is needed. Not everybody gets to where they have all these complex shrines all over the place, or there's sacred objects over here and there in their home. Some people just simply do not have the space, and that's fine. So take things at your speed. Being a non-specialist, you don't have to even demonstrate the kinds of public-facing things that specialists will need to. Just keep your altar area clean, or your vey, whatever that vey happens to be, whether it's an Altoid tin, whether it's a sheet of paper, whatever that happens to be. Keep that place clean. Take care of your offerings when you're done making them, and you can either dispose of them in the sink if you're, say, in a place where you can't take offerings outside under a tree. And small gestures build up over time, because why would you dispose of offerings at a tree? Because that tree is taking the place of Yggdrasil. You are taking part in a relationship not only with your gods, ancestors, and Vatir, with the whole heathen cosmos, right? The point of being a polytheist is to be embedded and to be continuing a relationship with all these beings, with this cosmos, in this cosmos. And so the gestures that you make in sacred space are a way of interacting in the micro with the macro. So when I praise a tree, thanking it for taking my offerings, I am not only praising this tree, but I'm also praising the tree behind it, the big T tree, the world tree, Yggdrasil. But I'm also praising that small tree, because that small tree is its own spirit and is a connection point. So these things aren't divorced from one another. Over time, you might find that the meanings behind certain ritual actions get more complex or get simpler. It might simply be, yes, I am putting offerings down in front of a tree, and I am just making offerings to that tree. It might be that as you go along, I am continuing the cycle of reciprocity with the whole cosmos by laying these offerings down, by watering this tree. I am acting as the Norns do and continuing keeping this cycle of reciprocity, this refreshing of Yggdrasil going. And I say this to non-specialists because this is not the province of specialists. This is everybody's job. This continuing the cycle of reciprocity with the gods, ancestors, and Vatir, being part and parcel of the cosmos. This is everybody's work. This is not just the province of specialists. There's a big difference between what specialists are supposed to do and what non-specialists are supposed to do. Specialists serve community functions. It's a job. Non-specialists don't have the kinds of requirements of expertise, ethics, and all the rest that are part and parcel of having a job in the community and a responsibility to the community. So if you're, say, a Sarenth worker on your own, you might have skill, but what differentiates you from, say, a Sarenth Kona that is public and has a shingle out is that Sarenth Kona is doing work for other people. Now, expertise, who your responsibilities are held with, these are big and weighty things, and not every non-specialist has to have that in order to have expertise in a given area of study. You might be a good Sarenth worker, but you won't be a Sarenth Kona for a community unless that community accepts and lands that responsibility on you. Okay? So, moving on, what are other forms of worship that a non-specialist might engage in? You might engage in ancestor veneration, ancestor worship. Now, some folks will have issues with their recent ancestors, and that's fine. Statistically speaking, not all your ancestors are assholes. If you've got issues with your current line, go back further. And if you have Christian ancestors that are pushing back for whatever reason, go back further until you find pagan ones, and then bring those into your fold. It is okay to look further back. It's not my first recommendation because you should hopefully know enough of these names to prevent issues of identity coming up if you're doing active divination work or active dialogue. And as a non-specialist, you don't need to have ongoing clairaudience type experiences to have a really good, fulfilling relationship with your ancestors. Just set a place that's a white cloth with a candle and a cup of water. Just do that to start with. If you have names, write them down on a piece of paper. If you have photos, use that. It doesn't have to be very complex. Like with the gods, like with the Vatir, it does not need to be complex to be a powerful, rewarding, beautiful practice. If you're the only person worshiping the ancestors in your family, you just might get saddled with work as time goes on. And that doesn't necessarily make you a specialist, it just makes you a polytheist in 2021. So, with worship of the ancestors, again, start small. A candle, an offering cup. And if you feel called to, start expanding who you offer to. And again, your prayers here can be very simple. Hail ancestors, thank you for giving me life. Thank you for giving me breath. Thank you for your blessings in my life. Thank you for letting me be the latest descendant. Start things off with gratitude. And it can just simply grow from there. And if you decide to include more bloodlines, say, or professions, like, say you're a carpenter, and you start including other carpenters that you learned under and have passed on, that is a legitimate form of ancestor worship to me that I haven't expanded idea of who the ancestors are compared to some other folks. I include bloodlines, adoption, any kind of lineage, including spiritual, professional, um, and any kind of spirits that you have a strong draw to. And for those who are unsure of who to talk to first, where does your heart go? When you think ancestor worship, who are the kinds of ancestors that you want to reach out to? If you've had issues with your Christian ancestors, you might reach back to your pagan ancestors. You might reach to the queer dead, for instance. You might reach to, as I said earlier, the first carpenters of your profession, or maybe you'll reach out to the founder of whatever tradition within polytheism you're practicing. So there's a lot of different options depending on where you're at in polytheism for you to reach out and have relationships with. And even if you get no sensory information from any of your gods, ancestors, or Vatir, this is needed good worship, needed good practice. This is the foundation of a spiritual life for all polytheists. Earth-shattering responses are not required. Earth-shattering, earthquaking, mind-blasting responses from any of the gods, ancestors, or Vatir, expecting that can actually set you up for hurt. What if it doesn't happen? Are you going to stop being a polytheist? You know, not everybody gets the grand head-banging experiences, and not everybody needs them. As I said, there's a big difference between specialists and non-specialists, and one of those is that sometimes the specialist gets their head trashed every now and again because some work needs to be done, and the gods are going to come in and do what work needs to be done because that's the job you signed up for. Non-specialists may not have that happen. Then again, there might be non-specialists whose ancestors are particularly loud or insistent that something get done. It might be the case that you'll have a major experience where a god or goddess plops into your life, says, get this work done, whatever it happens to be, for instance, a baby blanket, and you feel like the urge is there and you must get this done, hell or high water. These are all legitimate experiences, and even if you have no peak experiences, that is as legitimate as a person who has continuous ones. Because the work of being a polytheist is every polytheist's work. Every polytheist's practice is to live in good relationship with the gods, ancestors, and spirits. So I hope this has helped you, and I hope this has reassured you, because we'll be talking more about what specialists can engage in and might do in the next video. So thank you, folks. I'll see you in the next one.